started with check processing and moved to ACH and wire. And so we're the oldest by far. We were the Fed before there was a Fed. We used to print currency, store the nation's gold, do all the activities that the Fed does today. In fact, we helped stand up the Fed back in the day. In, I guess it was 1913. I was not here then. But as you heard, we clear and settle about $2 trillion a day. We are owned by 24 of the largest banks in the country, and I think a lot of you know that. But I think what's important to note is we service every bank who wants to use our services. We have about close to 500 banks that use our various payment rails. And let's face it, in the digital age, which is clearly what we are in today, our payment rails were developed 40 years ago. Pre-digital age, pre-internet, pre-everything. Actually, I find it amazing that I can order a package from Amazon, have it delivered faster than I get a payment from one bank to another. The fintechs are leveraging that vacuum, if you will. They're attacking that vacuum, but they're doing it kind of in a, I would call a Rube Goldberg-ish way. The consumer thinks the money's moved, but it hasn't. The money's not in the account. If it's going through the ACH rails, it could be a 3 or 4 day event.
A quick follow-up on the cores. And I know you guys are deep in discussions with those three, primarily those three, and a host of others. Rough time frames. I know you guys have been working to get this system implemented. What are they telling you roughly in terms of how quickly they could be partners on implementation?
I think this, the end of maybe this quarter, beginning of next quarter, they're going to start to light up. You know, they all have multiple systems.
Right.
So it's been tough. I think FIS has told us they're doing what's called mass enablement, so they will be able to light up, I think, all of their cores simultaneously. Mass enablement, so they will be able to light up, I think, all of their cores simultaneously. I might be a little bit off on that, but not by much.
Почти единственная была универсальная валюта мировая. Зачем-то Соединенные Штаты начали использовать долларовые расчеты как инструмент политической борьбы. Вводите ограничения на использование доллара. Своими руками начали пилить сук, на котором сидят. Но скоро они грохнутся. Доллары сокращаются как резервная валюта во многих государствах мира. Иран ограничивает в долларовых расчетах, на Россию вводит какие-то ограничения, на другие страны. Это подрывает доверие к доллару. Неужели это непонятно? Своими руками уничтожают доллар.
Short-term debt cycle or the business cycle, we're 10 years into this expansion, and many of those stimulants that happen will be dissipating. We won't have more interest rate cuts that are material. You won't have more tax cuts and so on. And this is true around the world as we have our obligations. So we're coming into this period that is sort of a big sag. Not a debt crisis in that way, but a lot of obligations that are coming at us, particularly in the mature reserve currency countries. And they include pension obligations, healthcare obligations, and the like, large deficits which will have to be monetized. They'll print money to deal with that. There's a reserve currency issue. And then, of course, we have the external conflict or the issues of the rising of a great power in the form of China rising and the United States having its let's say, relative decline. So we're at a point, I think, that is very similar to 1944. There's a war, after a period of war, there's a period which there's a peace because nobody wants to fight the country that has won the war, and there's a new world order. And there was a new monetary system. 1944, we established the dollar, reserve currency-based monetary system, and the like. And I think that all of those is going to really change the world order in dramatic ways in the next 10 years.
Sort of two things here. There's the Ripple protocol, and then there's Ripple Labs. So the Ripple protocol, like Bitcoin, is an open source protocol that anybody can use. You don't have to pay Ripple Labs a fee or license anything. It really is like a public good. We don't own it, we built it, but it has now been released to the world. And the protocol is really three things. So some ways similar to the Bitcoin protocol, some ways very different. The way we view this is, first and foremost, this should be a distributed payments protocol. That sort of comes first before the map-based currency. We think that's really what the world needs, this idea of an internet for value, which we can talk about. Second, it is a math-based currency. Like Bitcoin, math-based currency simply means a currency without a counterparty, which is a really unique thing in the world and plays a really, really unique and important role in building an internet for value. And then third, very differently from Bitcoin, because Ripple is value agnostic. You can put anything in there. You can put Bitcoins themselves in there. You can put airline miles, dollar, euro, yuan, real. Anything can be in Ripple. It ends up being, we think, the world's first distributed currency exchange.
Regulators around the globe are concerned that cryptocurrencies are vulnerable to investor fraud and have been used to finance illicit activities. But cryptocurrencies are different from other asset classes in that they are not issued by anyone who could be regulated. They're borderless and they can function in isolation from the existing financial system. This raises the basic question of whether they can effectively be regulated. To answer this question, we build a data set of regulatory news events and systematically evaluate whether cryptocurrency markets react to regulatory news. We do find that there is a strong reaction of prices and transaction volumes. To exemplify, take a look at what happened when the US Securities and Exchange Commission in early 2017 denied an application for a Bitcoin exchange-traded fund. Immediately after the announcement, the price of Bitcoin dropped by 16%, and also other cryptocurrencies were strongly affected. The first reason is that, whereas in theory cryptocurrencies can be accessed directly, in practice they are cumbersome to use and accessed via middlemen, such as crypto exchanges. And these middlemen can be regulated. But there is more to why national regulation can be effective. Markets are still segmented across jurisdictions. Case in point is the kimchi premium, the fact that the price of Bitcoin has at times been 40% higher in Korea than elsewhere. Underlying strict foreign exchange regulation makes it difficult to trade Bitcoin across borders. Overall, we find that there is scope to apply regulation, should authorities decide to do so. And we also find that regulation is not necessarily bad news for the cryptocurrency industry. Many cases of fraud and theft via hacking document that it could benefit from a well-defined legal status.
So that brings us to the point of now we have an understanding of what a blockchain is, how are blocks committed to the blockchain, what are the different mechanisms, consensus mechanisms in place, because consensus is what really forms the core of blockchain. I mean, decentralization is great, immutability is great, shared ledger is great, but consensus mechanism is what really differentiates all of these networks. So you have permissionless blockchains, you have permissioned blockchains. A permissionless blockchain is anyone can be a part of that network. So for example, Bitcoin, even you and me can be a part of that network, right? Whereas with something like Hyperledger, it's a very permissioned blockchain. So only certain nodes can be a part of that blockchain network. Only certain nodes can be committers on that ledger. And there will be a certain node that will decide randomly that this particular node can be the committer. What that allows them to do is increase the scale of transactions that they can process, because it's limited, it's not miners coming in and trying to compete. And that's why the Bitcoin network is slow today, whereas some of these other networks like Hyperledger, more permission networks can be faster. But obviously it goes against the point of decentralization. You're again going back somewhere in the centralization space. Depending on your use case, for enterprises who want to form private consortiums or maybe a closed network, a Hyperledger or Ripple can be a more viable solution.
This year, in this respect, is to push the reset button. Let me explain. The world is much too much still caught in a crisis management mode. And we forget that we should take now into our hands and we should look for solutions for the really fundamental issues. We should look at our future in a much more constructive, in a much more strategic way. And that's what Davos is about.
There's a documentary coming out in the next few months that alludes to the greatest of all time. The greatest wealth creator of all fucking time since Moses. I wonder who they're talking about. I've created billions, tens of billions, hundreds of millions, billions, tens of billions, and hundreds of billions. And there's no other swinging dick on the planet that can say that. Since fucking Moses, before Moses. Perhaps that's why you're here. Perhaps not. If you leave here liking me, I didn't do my job. I'm going to say it again. If you leave here liking me, I failed. I'm going to insult you, whether you're black, brown, yellow, or pink. Whether you're a Jew, a Muslim, a Catholic, or a Protestant. Whether you're agnostic. I take no prisoners. And as our lovely daughter would say, Kelly Pena, she says, Daddy treats everybody the same, like shit. This is the beginning of the greatest economic cycle this country has had since World War II. And I knew the things that Donald would do. And he hasn't even fucking got started. But this is the eye of the motherfucking storm. The perfect storm. It ain't never going to get any fucking better. Never. This is perfect for the QLA model. If I could have written the motherfucker a prescription or a formula, I couldn't have written it any better. Low interest rates, money's free, you stupid fucks. Massive chaos. And Donald's gonna rip the motherfucking economy apart. And he's gonna fuck it for practice in a good way. This is it. It ain't never gonna get any fucking better. This is like a multiple orgasm the rest of your life, you fucking slags that are in the audience. This is it.
Sometimes I don't want to hear what Dan has to tell me. But as I wrote in one of my blogs, the old man, he's always right. Because he's telling you what you don't want to hear about yourself, but what you know is true. And that is, you're not stepping yourself up. You're not stepping your game up. And you get caught up in fear. As Dan says, false expectations appearing real.